I've been playing a bit of Elden Ring Night Rain in my spare time over the past couple of weeks. I think the game is fine, good for a few runs, but not something I see myself coming back to a lot in the future. The highlight of the entire game for me was the returning Dark Souls bosses. I had so much fun fighting them, in fact, that I figured the smart thing to do would just be go and replay Dark Souls again for like the bazillionth time. But as I was about to do that, I figured I could effectively kill two birds with one stone and make a video out of it. After all, I like using new weapons every playthrough, and I have quite literally never touched the whip, so I figured it could make for a fun run. I know absolutely nothing about it other than it is considered to not be very good, seeing as it comes with a few notable handicaps. For example, it cannot riposte, it cannot backstab, and as far as I could tell, it also doesn't have a plunging attack. Its long horizontal sweeping with most of its attacks also means that it has a habit of frequently bouncing off walls and cramped areas, so it sounds like it's going to be an absolute treat. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. Many of you may be saying the run is already an impossibility as you cannot start with the whip and therefore I cannot fight my way past the first boss and out of the tutorial. Well, fortunately, Dark Souls has many glitches, and the one we need to make this run not an instant failure is remarkably easy to pull off. Firstly, we'll need to take the black fire bombs as our starting gift. For this run, we will then also need to be the thief class, as they start with the master key for free. The fire bombs are mandatory for the skip, so we need the key to be able to even get the whip once we make it out of the asylum, lest we want to try glitching past more bosses. To be fair, the whip scales with dexterity, and the thief starts with 15 in that stat, so I probably would have gone with them regardless of what's on their keychain. Right, once we make it to the asylum demon, we need to start hurling the black fire bombs like it's going out of style. Again, you may scream invalid, but the skip ensures that we don't technically kill him, so all is right with the world. As soon as the boss dies and starts fading out of existence, we simply quit back to the main menu and reload our save. Once we're back, nothing seems out of the ordinary as the asylum demon is still gone. But after progressing up until we meet up with Oscar, he will hand over the undead asylum key like normal, as well as the big pilgrim's key, which he will only give you if you kill the asylum demon during the first encounter. This is how we know the glitches worked. Proceeding up past the skinless men, taking care not to get hit as we still can't fight back, remember, we can proceed through the fog wall and lo and behold, Big Blue is back and as healthy as ever. We now live in a glitched world, and thanks to getting that big key, we can open the door and just casually leave. The music also stops and starts depending on where you're looking, and if you're standing in this spot particularly, the game just cannot decide if you're still in the boss fight or not. We just push on as normal and take the crew cab all the way to Firelink, which, fortunately, after resting, gets rid of the health bar that was taking up real estate along the bottom part of the screen. Alright, now to get the weapon of choice. Thanks to the ever so reliable master key, we can take the shortcut to Blighttown through New Londo, and with some rather careful rolling can avoid every single enemy in our path until we make it to the bonfire. If I was confident in my abilities, I would just keep going to the whip, so that when I inevitably perish, I'll respawn at Firelink and won't have to make the trek back. But the thing is, I am not. The whip is located about halfway up behind a fog wall in the way that the game wants you to come down after killing the gaping dragon. It doesn't take that long, but I'd be lying if I said my hands weren't sweating while I was trying to safely maneuver around the weird fire-breathing bugs, seeing how they could nearly one-shot me at my current state. I managed to also somehow evade all of the toxic spitters, so that was cool. Once I reach the white wall with holding the whip, I walk on through and then simply fall off to the side here as the weapon is directly below us. Honestly, it wasn't as bad as I thought getting here as a pacifist. Looking at the whip's stats, they're not the worst despite what I believed prior. A B scaling in dex and 80 base damage off the bat is nothing to scoff at this early on. That said, I got a little big for my britches and decided to test it out on Quelaag first of all people.
I'm going to fix this like I fix every other problem in my life, by whipping everybody within a 500-yard radius, starting with you, Binky boy! Okay, wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, alright, I can take the hint. 5 minutes of near straight whipping barely took a quarter off of her health. It's doable, but so is cutting my nails with a cheese grater. It would just be a long, drawn-out process that would be more painful than it's worth. Pressing on towards the undead burg, and I get to familiarise myself with the whip's unique moveset. When one-handed, its attack's pretty much how you would expect, you know, just the old whoosh. It's a vertical motion, so probably my best bet in tight spaces. When two-handing it, we get some rather nice horizontal sweeps and decent range. Again, though, as mentioned, not the best for smaller interior sections, or areas with a lot of solid objects as it will just bounce off of them. That said, when trying to fight the first rat, it becomes abundantly clear that the one-handed moveset is also rather abysmal when it comes to recoiling off of things. Outside of universal moves like the humping... Oh. Outside of universal moves like the jumping attack and the kick, the last attack at our disposal that I will be getting use out of is the two-handed heavy. A little bit of a slow start up, but it gives the two-handed style a good vertical crack of the whip, and it does decent enough damage. Plus I'd be lying if I said I wasn't mainly just using it for the incredible pose you strike when readying up for the swing. With the explanation of my repertoire out of the way, I blast through the undead burg. Lest you're using your bare fists or the hilt you start with, carving a path through the basic hollows should never pose much issue. This includes killing the undead merchant in possession of the Uchi Katana. No real reason for that, all things considered, but it is so ingrained into my muscle memory at this point that I cannot fight the urge to not brutalize this poor man. The rest of the hollows leading up to the Taurus Demon were unremarkable, although I was lucky enough to get 2 Titanite shards from both the Crossbowman and the Donkey Kong Barrel Tossing Enthusiast. What I wasn't able to do was kill the Titanite Lizard. Spoiler alert, it took me until nearly 2/3 of the way into this run to find an effective way of dealing with these little bastards, seeing how most of the whip's moves just swooshed right over their little heads. Taurus Demon time now, and as we have no plunging attack, we cannot cheese off half of his health bar like normal. What we can still do is infuse the whip with gold pine resin. I genuinely just thought this would be one of those weapons that the resin refused to work on, like the Black Knight sword for example. It's a tad overkill, I'm gonna be honest, as it's only the second boss after all. I was able to secure victory by getting right underneath him and repeatedly whipping his little demons until he finally gave in and just died. I meet up with Solaire simply to say hi, open the shortcut to the Undead Burg for later, and then stroll past the Hellkite Drake to the next bonfire, as I would rather risk being singed by him than try fighting those 3 rats below with no way to heal my poison. I run up the stairs just before the boar so that I can sprint jump down and through the gate before the hollows have a chance to close it, allowing me to skip the small section where you must go down and around to open up said gate. Thanks to the advantage of the stairs, I was able to control the fight against the 3 that managed to follow me and emerge victorious. Once more, I am blessed with yet another Titanite shard. Not to repeat myself, but I then fight the Boulder Knights, and wouldn't you know it, one of them also drops another shard. I've always been oddly lucky when it comes to rare drops in Souls games. It's weird, but I'm not complaining. The Knights are easy enough to deal with, something I forgot to mention about the whip, is that its attacks cannot be parried, so I don't need to worry about the ones with the tiny shields fishing for ripostes, whereas the big ones are so aggressive that they rarely keep their guard up and can just be slowly whittled down. Making it to Andre, and I can put all those shards to good use to immediately plus the whip to 3, and then thanks to killing the Taurus Demon, plus everything else on my way here, I could buy the last remaining shards to see the whip hit plus 5. I also grabbed the weapon smithing box so that when I get the large and very large embers, I can reinforce my weapons at bonfires as soon as I get the relevant materials. For now though, I test the whip out on the nearby Titanite Demon. It's a long fight that costs me 8 Estus flasks throughout the ordeal, nearly 13 years after my initial playthrough, and this enemy's hurt boxes still damage me on both physical and a mental level. We're obviously hitting harder than before, make no mistake, but that doesn't exactly mean the weapon is good yet either. Case in point, it still takes 3 hits while firmly grasping the whip to kill even one of these demonic bushes. Against my better judgment, and again because I've ran through this so many times I have a particular order to how I tackle things, I went and faced down the Moonlight Butterfly. Look, we know how this goes. You dance around its easily avoidable spells until it gets a little peckish and decides to come down and eat some plants, at which point you can smack it silly. Nothing new about that. The problem is, of course, my damage output. I lack anywhere close to do this in one cycle, so the fight dragged on for what was the longest 6.5 minutes of my life. It took 4 cycles. 4. I've never seen any weapon take more than 2. Well, any reasonable weapon. I clear out the rest of the gardens with ease, making sure to grab the important items like the wolf ring and of course the grass crest shield. It'll be attached to me like a turtle shell for the foreseeable future, as due to being a thief, I don't even reach the strength requirement to properly hold it in my offhand. To the gargoyles next, and we can finally see a genuine positive about the whip in action. Not against the boss, no, but the buffed hollow gang squad that rushes you right before the fight. The corridor they funnel down is just wide enough that I won't bounce off of the walls when two-handing the whip, so I can use the large sweeping area to my advantage and take multiple of them out in one go. Thank God for that too, as I don't think it's crazy to say that they have killed me more times over the years than the gargoyles have. Last bit of cleanup and it's murdering Lautrec. I gain nothing from following his questline through to completion and would much rather have the FAP ring now. I play it smart and lure him outside so I can keep him at range and don't need to worry about the level geometry screwing me over. He's an easy kill, so I equip the ring, and now I'll permanently have more health, stamina, and equip load. Sure, the ring will break if I remove it, but this is countered by simply not removing it. Finally, making my way to the gargoyles, and the unthinkable happened. I died. I cannot remember the last time they got the best of me. It was entirely my fault. For whatever reason, I started playing things way too defensively once the second one entered the fray, rather than just focusing down the first one and stopping the fight from becoming a 2v1. Second try, and I take my own advice. I got him as far away as possible from where number 2 jumps down, so I had as much time as I could to whip him a new one. Sure enough, I deal with him just before the second gets within striking distance, allowing me to then easily roll away and bait out the fire breath attack that this one in particular just loves to spam for some reason. Once he starts doing that, I can easily reposition behind him to abuse his slow recovery, getting a very easy win that I really should have secured the first time if my brain wasn't just pudding at this point. We can now ring the bell and be off to deal with the Capra Demon and Gaping Dragon in the depths. Although, before that, seeing how I have now unlocked the shortcut back to Firelink, I decided I may as well head on back to the Asylum and deal with everything there before I forget. Sure enough, as soon as we return, the Asylum Demon is still waiting at the door like a sad puppy for our return. Unfortunately, he is still aggressive, so we need to put him down. Whip or no, I have a +5 weapon, so comes as no surprise, I'm sure, that this takes less than a minute to put him back in the dirt again. I took care not to move around too much during the fight, as I didn't want us to tumble down into the Stray Demon arena. Although, in retrospect, I think it would have been funny to see the Asylum Demon follow me into that fight and get one shot by the Stray's AoE. Speaking of the Stray Demon, I inflict very little damage, but on the flip side, I got him stuck in the loop of butt slam followed by his forward AoE slam. That means I just back up when the big Tukas comes crashing down, rush in for some whips, run behind him when he charges the AoE, hit him after the explosion for a little more damage, which then repeats the cycle. This took about as long as the encounter with the Moonlight Butterfly, yet it didn't feel anywhere near as tedious. The only other thing I need you all to know about this fight is the playlist I was listening to on Shuffle switched to 1,000 Miles by Vanessa Carlton, and I can't quite describe the dumb little grin that put on my face for the last few minutes of this encounter. With the Titanite slab in hand, I round up the last two important items, those being the Peculiar Doll and the Rusted Iron Ring, before hightailing it out of there back to Firelink. I attempted to fight the Black Knights, but they weren't exactly in areas that made it easy for the whip to function. Onwards to the next boss, that being the oh-so-wonderful Capra Demon, so I need to make my way back towards Solaire now that I have access to its boss arena. On the way, I got a mild jump scare from the boar, which nearly gored me at the bonfire under the Wyvern. Typically, he isn't supposed to come this far from where you encounter him, meaning he completely de-aggroed after the attack and just slowly walked his way back. This also meant he wasn't hostile, allowing me to easily whip him in the butt until death. The dogs, for once, were not the absolute worst things in existence. I could easily one-shot them with a basic one-handed whip and didn't even get caught up on the tight areas. This goes for the two in the Capra Demon encounter as well, believe it or not. Typically, they are the real boss in here, what with the way they immediately rush you and just how little room you have to breathe. But the range of the whip came in clutch, and I was able to easily avoid the Capra Demon and take down the pups with no effort. When it was down to a one-on-one, yeah, he hits me a few times and can take a good chunk out of my life, but he has so few attacks at his disposal that he can't do much to fight back in the long run. Before long, we emerge victorious and can be on our way to the Gaping Dragon in the depths. Although, considering I was fast rolling and had an empty ring slot, I figured it was in my best interests to grab the cartwheel ring from the ninja in the forest. I didn't feel like spending 20k souls to open a door I'll use a grand total of 2 times, so I took the old reliable ladder next to the Hydra. For what it's worth, despite already having the Rusted Iron Ring, I negated fighting the bundle of water snakes for now, and just tanked the damage during the climb. That fight is tedious enough as is, let alone with a whip. I'll return later when I have a few more upgrades into the thing. Speaking of upgrades and whatnot, I should probably let you know that for levels, I've just been focusing on getting my dex up to 40. Once that happens, I'll probably just split my remaining points into Vitality and Endurance. One good thing about doing runs like these is levels are pretty self-explanatory. Anyway, we make the roundabout trip to the Cat Covenant, join the Kitty Brigade, and then immediately pick a fight with the club's local Shy Kid. I was going to fight him honourably and not just kick him off the cliff, but seemingly Flippers here had other plans and really wanted to put those added iframes of his to the test. As soon as I get his souls, I quit out and reload, grab the Darkwood Grain Ring, and then proceed to cartwheel all the way back to the depths. The horde of fleshmen that typically rush you all at once decide to play fair today and only charge me one at a time, allowing me to pick them off once they got within whipping distance. Most importantly of all, I fought off the Butcher and their 2 dogs for the large Ember. Once we make it back to Andre, that's an easy +6 weapon and then some if I grab more large Titanite shards. There's nothing of value in the depths this go around outside of that Ember, so I just blitz through as fast as I can, only really stopping to fight the Chandler and his rat minions, simply because I don't need him buffing the dragon while attempting to hit trick shots on me. Speaking of the Gaping Dragon, it's the epitome of slow and steady. The boss is by no means difficult due to how slow it is, but it can still easily one-shot you if you're not careful. Granted, that's not the only reason we're taking it slow. You guessed it, the whip is taking the smallest of bites out of his health bar with each crack of the whip, no matter if it was one or two-handed. The only way to get respectable damage would be to strike his little noodle head when he lies down, but considering he only does that when he's prepping for the charge that could nearly one-tap me, I typically just considered it not worth the effort. In other words, I spent most of the fight just whipping his heels, which, even thinking about how much that would realistically hurt, makes me wince a little bit. The fight feels like it goes on longer than it really does due to the monotony, but after only a couple of minutes, I land the final strike, and can finally head back to Quelaag for the rematch. After a little prep, of course. And after the most embarrassing death as my controller disconnected and buffered my movement at the same time, causing me to mindlessly walk off the cliff near Firelink to my death. Which in turn meant I had to make the trip all the way back from the depths for a second time. Up to Andre, I hand over the Ember, and thanks to having a single large Titanite shard, can ascend the whip to +6. Back down to Blighttown, and I decide to do one round of worm killing for some large Titanite, and get enough to get the weapon to +8. Figured that should be more than enough for Quelaag, and I was correct. At 107 damage per swing, that means it should only take around 29 hits to take her out. That's not accounting for the odd running, roll or heavy that I threw in just to spice things up. I will say, having my recent replay of Elden Ring so fresh in my mind, you really see just how simple a lot of the Dark Souls base game bosses are in terms of what they can or cannot do to defend themselves. I was pretty much able to avoid everything that Quelaag could throw at me by just simply staying up close in front of her. All I had to watch out for was her AoE, as even at this stage it could be an easy way to instantly lose the fight. Case in point, I barely got caught by it here, and it nearly ended the attempt. Once the spider has been squashed, we ring the bell, and then pay Ceaseless Discharge a very quick visit as, let's be honest, there is no reason to not just bully him for the easy win. Plus, the clothes you get for doing things this way are pretty cool. I'm like a kinky Nazgul with this setup. Before heading to the House of Fun, I did yet another round of worm hunting to get the whip to +10. FYI, I will not be grinding out chunks, even though that is an option. Honestly, I really do not feel like fighting wave after wave of Dark Wraiths, plus that run back from Firelink is incredibly monotonous. That said, with a +10 weapon, there's no reason to not at least do some ghost busting, followed by a small bout of Elder Abuse so that I can open the floodgates and have access to the lower part of New Londo. This was also where I had my first run-in with a Dark Wraith and got humbled rather fast. I thought I'd stand more of a chance after how effective the whip was on the ghosts, but I was sadly mistaken. Not to worry, we can head straight back down, this time using the newly opened shortcut, and claim our prize, that being the very large Ember. We have yet to collect any chunks as I haven't tried to fight any Black Knights, and as aforementioned, the Crystal Lizards are wee bastards. That said, if there was ever a time to try, it may as well be now before I head off to Anor Londo. So it's back to the Lizard before the Hydra, and after more attempts than I am going to even acknowledge, I find out that if I can corner the Lizards, I am able to kill them with a single two-handed heavy due to its downward arc. I get a single chunk for this, so I figured, why stop there? Again, +10 weapons, so I can bully the Halbert Knight to giving up his belongings. Sadly, it's only a blue chunk, but at least I know I don't have to worry about them anymore now that I have the damage on my side. I take a brief moment to walk past where he was so that I can head into New Londo via the floodgates that I just opened. Only doing this to reclaim my souls, or more specifically, the 10 humanities I like having on my person for its increased item discovery. To avoid the Dark Wraiths coming back to push my shit in yet again, I just homeward bone back to Andre, where I can use the single chunk to get the +11 whip. This also means I have passed the final ascension, so any further reinforcements to my weapon, I can just do myself at a bonfire with the weaponsmith box. May as well continue with the culling of the Black Knights, so going back through the Undead Burg, next up would be the one with the Ultra Greatsword. Typically, I like to get his attention and then lure him back down to the nearby bonfire, as it's a more open area and I have more room to dodge, especially useful for today with the aforementioned issues with the whip bouncing off of everything. There is only one problem with this plan today. The Black Knight never followed me down the stairs. I waited and waited, but nothing. Naturally, I figure, okay, I haven't aggroed him properly, I'll go back up and try again. However, upon making it back up, he is nowhere to be found. As you can imagine, at this point I am quite confused, as the spiral staircase is rather narrow and we never passed each other, so where is he? He also cannot be dead, as I never got any souls, nor his items, as the Black Knight's drops are collected automatically once you beat them. I checked the roofs of the other buildings, just in case he somehow ended up on them, but he simply appeared to have vanished. I even went down and checked the part underneath the bridge with the rats, you know, in case he walked down there somehow, and I did not notice, but once again, no. After close to 3 minutes of walking around the surrounding area and even making my way back up the stairs just to be certain, as I was heading back to the bonfire in an attempt to reset the man, I gained 800 souls in a single chunk. What just happened? I don't fucking know, but hey, free chunk, that's all that matters, I guess. The final knight in the area is the first one you find right before the Taurus demon, who is also the easiest, so this shouldn't take long. Something I should mention is that I just parried him for the easy kill. You may remember I mentioned at the beginning that I cannot riposte. That is still true. I cannot get the animation for landing an attack after a parry. However, I can still parry and then just hit them while they're in the stunned animation. Doesn't do as much as a traditional riposte, I'm sure, but it is still free damage if I can time it right. I used this trick on Havel for a bit as well. Eventually, I just went back to circling, dodging and striking after he attacked, as it was quicker. Plus, you know, it is Havel. One wrong timing on the parry and... Don't know why I bothered to get the ring, as I'm still rolling around in the fire blanket. Speaking of, I put those robes to the test right away against the bridge wyvern. They easily allow me to tank hits from it, even with my unremarkable hit points. It's mostly luck based, but you can stop it from doing most of its fire attacks if you position yourself just right so that it keeps trying to step on you instead. I was able to get it to do this a few times, as it's also where you can get the most damage in. It wasn't a flawless fight by any means. I became the Ashen one a few games early, if you catch my meaning, more than once, but eventually I managed to eat enough Infernos and crack enough whips that I came out on top. You don't get anything of worth for this. Yes, 10,000 souls is nice, but at this stage it's not that much. It's like a level or two at most. Also, side note, in my last Dark Souls video, some people lost their minds that I never brought attention to the fact that I got the Boulder Side Sword to drop without grinding for it, seeing as it has an abysmally low drop rate. As I said earlier though, I just have some insanely good luck for drops in these games, I couldn't tell you why. Case in point, here is it dropping yet again in this playthrough. All I was trying to do was get a few extra souls for a level, and figured they'd be some quick kills. Go me again, I suppose. Sen's Fortress now, and we shall just skip to the end. I know everyone likes to meme on this place, you know, haha, welcome to the House of Fun and all that, but once you have made it through more than once, you know what to expect and can pass through easily. Like, once you realise that just about all of the swinging blades have more than enough room for you to just stand in between them, there isn't much left to fear. I was worried the Iron Golem would be a defensive wall against the whip, so I took the time to deal with the firebomb tossing giant. He was slow and lumbering enough that he was very easy to put down. Plus, I get yet another chunk out of it, so huzzah! Time for the golem, and it's a pushover like normal. Really shouldn't have expected this to go any other way. I don't manage to cheese him off the bridge, but I do manage to knock him down. Twice, in fact. Never done that one before. Typically, I output enough damage that he is dead shortly after stumbling over. Wasn't even certain he could fall a second time. I also did this hitless too. Again, not much of a flex, it's the Iron Golem for God's sakes, but thought it was worth mentioning to really drive home how brain dead this fight can be. Entering the end of the first half of the game, we make it down Orlando, where after some rafter roughhousing that fortunately no longer removes years off of my life due to stress, we can make it to Gwyn's tomb, and due to all of the chunks I grabbed on the way, get the whip to plus 13. At this point, I'd say the damage output makes the whip more than viable, so after a somewhat slow start, the pace was beginning to pick up tremendously. For example, I took a detour to the Painted World and was never in any danger due to the whip. In fact, we got to show off our prowess against another whipmaster in the form of Jerry the Golden Q-Tip. I was hoping to say this was a dramatic dance of death like Duel, but really he spawned in, I hit him like 4 times and he died. He has almost 0 poise, so he was effectively stun-locked. Good fight, Jerry. You would assume this is where I take his notched whip as my own. After all, it's near identical, except it also inflicts bleed, making it just the superior option. But you see, you all would be wrong. Look at the title or thumbnail again. It's with the whip, not a whip. I am not allowing cheap knockoffs. We stand the bog standard leather whip in this household. Anyway, I take out the dragon and then make it to the half-breed. And here comes yet another positive of the whip. It excels in the fight against Priscilla. Say it with me again, but its big horizontal whips makes it incredibly easy to hit her, even though she still turns invisible. Not that it matters that much, as after doing a set amount of damage, she decides to give up the parlor tricks and just fight you fairly, which really shows just how bare bones the fight is. She doesn't seem to have many attacks that strike behind her, so just circling her and sticking to her back tends to win you the fight. Before heading back to the real world, I make sure to exit and reload, so that we may now become the one with the tip. There's not much else of worth in Anor Londo, so I decided to just shotgun it for the boss. Typically, the whip is rather effective at fighting multiple enemies at once, and while this is a 2v1, we all know that doesn't matter, as after you kill either Ornstein or Smo, the other just goes back to full health and gets a significant power boost. Well, Ornstein does. Smo essentially just gets some gold pine resin if you think about it. That's the super boss we'll be fighting, not just because he's easier than the other, but normal Ornstein being the quicker one is going to close the gap between you faster, meaning it's just easier to deal with him while Smo is in the back trying to catch up. He's also less tanky, so less time spent in phase 1. When it comes time for the second phase, I start playing just abysmally. You know, for fun. No, but honestly, I'm not sure what happened. I fought this boss countless times, but I was just getting slapped around by even the most easily avoidable moves. And that is saying something, because outside of the electric butt slam, a lot of Smo's hitboxes, I think, are rather forgiving. Like, his normal hammer swing will not hit you if you're standing close enough, as it only does damage if the end of the mallet connects, which makes sense. On the bright side, he is slow enough that I don't have to worry about committing to anything, which is always nice given some of the longer startup times on the whip's stronger attacks. It was from this point on I started to gain some mileage out of the rolling attack, well, I suppose in this case it's the cartwheel attack. Attacking right after a dodge typically does less damage, but it's a rather quick move to compensate. Considering I also get more iframes thanks to the cartwheels, it's just all around a good idea to use. After fumbling to get the last hit in, repeatedly, I managed to hold my brain cells together just long enough to walk up and smack him rather than trying to stay fully healed. This ends the fight, and I can finally get the Lord Vessel and warp between selective bonfires. I also removed the Q-tip because I'm gonna be honest, it was blocking my vision way more than I thought it would. This is typically where I like to deal with Sif, so I set off on that depressing adventure. I did take out the Hydra on the way. Rusted Iron Ring as per usual makes this fight not a complete headache, but it's still not very fun. At least the whip's range helped a bit. Making it to Sif, and there's not a whole lot to say. Unfortunately, they don't have an answer for you sitting underneath them and attacking the legs. Sometimes she might jump away, but then runs back in and resets the whole thing anyway. So yeah, quick clean kill, and now that I've got the Covenant of Artorias, nothing is stopping me from facing off against the Four Kings. I make one very small detour before that, so that I may buy Smo's set for the fight. Much like it's common knowledge to, let's say, just parry Gwyn for the easy win, putting on a heavy set of armor can negate most of what the Four Kings throw your way. I still wish to flip and dip for the time, so I just removed my shirt and equipped the Thunder Thighs. It may only be one piece of the set, but it makes a hell of a difference. Like, look how much more punishment I can withstand from the Dark Wraiths this way. I can actually competently fight them without getting combo and skewered within seconds. The luck of the Irish strikes once more as I get not one, but 2 chunks, one from each Dark Wraith. You add that to the one in this chest over here along with the slab, and now I have all I need to get a plus 15 weapon. I could leave and do that right now, but I came here to kill the Four Kings, so that's what I'm gonna do. Once I fatten myself up, I descend to the abyss and get ready for a grueling back and forth. It's not difficult, it just takes forever. My damage is still good for what it's worth, but not quick enough to dispatch one king before another comes gliding in. Even though I don't need to, I was able to avoid most of their basic moves by just slowly walking around to their left hand side. I'm starting to realise that works on a good chunk of Dark Souls 1's bosses, huh? Well, the only move it didn't work on was the grab, because once that thing is loaded, it is akin to a heat-seeking missile. It will get you. You just have to brace for the impact. Seemingly, they knew this, as one of the kings began to spam it. There was enough time for me to take a sip in between, but that doesn't make it any less annoying. With a bit more whipping and a little more dying, I was able to come out on top, although not before the fabled 5th king briefly appeared before the death cutscene. Why do the 4 kings have a cutscene for killing them? None of the other bosses get that. The closest I guess would be the Bed of Chaos having 2 scenes between destroying its oranges or whatever. That's where we're off to next, unfortunately. May as well get the worst of the lords out of the way first. Well, second, I have to always remind myself the 4 kings are one of the Lord Souls. Before facing off against the pseudo-triple whammy boss rush that is the clearly unfinished area of Lost Izalith, I went and got the whip to max like I said I would. It now does 200 base damage, and has progressed to having an A scaling index. No sugarcoating it, this thing slaps now. It's good, like really good. Could stand to be a little faster, but the damage I'm putting out along with the range and versatile moveset that I have come to enjoy quite a bit, this is just a solid weapon now. Although because of this, I'm not gonna lie, it kinda makes it hard to talk about the remaining base game bosses. I have a fully souped up weapon. Yeah, it may not be a conventional one, but what does that matter when it can still slice its way through whatever the game can throw at me with ease? I wrote literally 2 things in my notes for the rest of the base game, and they were new fit, which I assume means this hat, and wheel. I have absolutely no idea what that is referring to. So, lightning round of the remaining bosses. Fire Sage Demon, we love a reskin, bonus points for it being the 3rd time this boss has shown up in this game alone. FromSoft clearly love it though, as it returned as the basis for the Erdtree avatar in Elden Ring, and those things are bloody everywhere. Centipede Demon, it's been over a decade and its lingering hitbox on its stretchy arm still makes me cry. He could stand to stay on the ground and not hop around like he's on a pogo stick anytime I got close to him, but once he does land, I can bully his knees and ankles until he gives in. Clearly that fight took something out of me because I then proceeded to sit at the next bonfire for 30 minutes. Perhaps it wasn't that fight at all, maybe it was me mentally preparing myself for the absolute tomfuckery that awaited me behind the next fog wall. Last time I did this, I promised on my next attempt I wouldn't resort to the quitting out cheese to make my life easier. Well, unfortunately the time has come and I have to stick to my word. Granted, I essentially replicated the same result as the Bed of Chaos sweeps me into the abyss below like I was a bunch of potato skins destined for the trash can. The only difference, I get to hear a lot of this. It is honestly mind-blowing how hard the second half of this game just falls off a cliff, and yet I'd probably still put it in my top 50. 3rd time's the charm, and I luck my way across the branch bridge and just give the bug a piece of my mind. Pinwheel, come on. Nito, the worst part of this fight is the never-ending shambling skeleton soldiers as I wasn't making the whip a holy weapon. The hairy basket of bones himself mostly just sits there doing the most pathetically easy to dodge moves I have ever witnessed. The man is the first of the dead, he's been at this for so long I cannot blame him for just not giving a damn anymore. Highlight though was getting to show off the cool block trick again. I know it's nothing new, but I still think it's neat. The whip excels at this fight as the sweeping motions allow me to work on Nito while also just dealing with any other bone boys in the vicinity. With Nito dead, it's off to the Duke's archives. Boy, I do so love forced death scenes and prison escapes in my RPGs. As many are aware, the worst part of this area is simply making it to the dragon. I hate this, I really hate this. It does not matter, I know where to go, this still fills me with more dread than just about any other piece of media I have ever experienced. Okay, Immortal Seath time. Bait out the long range attack, rush in and give him some of that good old flagellation. This typically starts either the AoE ground spikes or the tail tantrum. Thus, you then back off, wait, bait out the laser again, and then repeat until one of you dies. This fight only becomes difficult if you're going for the Moonlight Greatsword, as slicing the tip off of his tail is a goddamn crapshoot. And that's it, all that's left is Gwyn. Could wrap this up in the next 2 minutes, but I figured people would get mad if I didn't tackle the very short DLC, so may as well run through that quickly. Ignoring the bizarre specifics of entering the DLC, it is rather straightforward. The first encounter being a boss sets the whole thing up nicely. Granted, the Guardian ain't very imposing, but it gets the job done, I suppose. Really, I just spent most of this fight trying to cut off its tail, seeing how it has the 3rd and final whip weapon. Again, wouldn't be able to use it, but still, may as well have tried. I managed to fumble the cut, mainly due to me not being able to hit it directly due to its position, as well as just outright killing the thing, as while I may have been whiffing the tail, I was still beating up the back end of the boss. I frolic through the garden at high speed to reach Artorias in record time, to which he promptly puts me in my place. Well, not promptly, but he does kill me. I was giving him more credit than I should have. I kept respecting his attacks far too much and kept backing up and looking for easy openings rather than just rushing him and keeping up the offensive. Yes, I still need to dodge, but I was playing way too scared. Hell, I even let him get his slow buff off. Once that happened, it was pancake making time. Next try, and I stick so close to him that the brim of my cap is constantly brushing against him. I start throwing out attacks at every opportunity, and it works like a treat. Dodging to the side works for just about every move that isn't the double spin. It's the same one that Sif does, so that's cute. I'm also able to knock him out of his buff phase by landing only 3 hits. Once that happens, the fight is all but over. Give him his dues, he managed to get one final blow in right before the end of the fight by throwing pocket sand in my eyes. The track through town is rather plain. I hit up all the usual points of interest, like getting the key and meeting Go, collecting the pendant that makes life easier, fighting Jimmy Bloodborne, as well as contending with this bizarre one-time enemy. Okay, so I looked it up, and supposedly more of them can spawn in the Chasm of the Abyss if your world is infested with a Gravelord servant. So that is equal parts cool and terrifying. I made sure to free Sif while in the Abyss, not to summon, just because I'm not a monster. Plus, if they were to die here, I must imagine that would cause some sort of time paradox. Making it past all of humanity, we make it to Manus, Father of the Abyss, a name and title I cannot read without hearing a thick Jamaican accent, and I don't know why. As the fight progresses, it's going rather well. Manus is one of the few bosses you need to be at least somewhat wary of getting close, as his juggle combo is almost a death sentence. At the very least, it's telegraphed thanks to his roar, so I can just cartwheel out of there more often than not. Despite this, he does catch me with the dark magic, although I'd put most of it down to my butterfingers falling over each other as I tried and failed to use the pendant. He then manages to follow this up with a well-timed bonk that ends the fight. Next go around, and my stupidity continues to show it knows no bounds, as despite having the extra iframes to easily avoid his slower moves, I decided that when I was injured, I would just heal right up in his face. Naturally, I get slapped for this, to which point the goo in my head says, "Let's try that one again." He then kills me. Manus throws me a bone on attempt number 3, by which I mean he kept getting stuck in cycles of repeating the same few moves, much like the Stray Demon earlier. It was especially good when he kept doing this jumping move as he was left wide open after the fact. He was even nice enough to save his magic for the final stretch of the fight, which gave me more than enough time to get the pendant ready. Not long after this, and after whiffing a spell that probably would have vaporized me, he fails to stop me closing the gap and I can win the fight. All that leaves is Calamite, which is a fight that I always remember being much worse than it is. Sure, he can hit like a truck, and I won't deny him that, but most of what he has is just the odd charge move and fire breath. The latter of which is easily punishable and where I get the majority of my damage in. I suppose he also boasts an impressive amount of health. Felt like I was slowly chipping away at him for ages before I was seeing any real progress. Another easy kill, putting a nice bow on the DLC, leaving only Gwyn left to deal with. Oh my god, I completely forgot about Gwendolyn. Well, I can't kill the illusion of the sister, so I make a small retread through the Tomb of the Giants to get the ring that allows me to access him. Not a hard boss by any stretch of the imagination. That said, him choosing to spam the arrows, the easiest move in his disposal to avoid, was probably not the best choice. Okay, right, finally, Gwyn time. Look, I'ma keep it real with you viewers, I was strapped for time when it came to facing Gwyn. At the time of recording and writing this, I am literally about to go on holiday for a week, and I really want this video finished before that happens. After 2 abysmal attempts at fighting Gwyn normally, I gave in and just cheesed him with the parry. A little more involved than usual given that I still cannot riposte, but when you get down to it, it pretty much works the same as ever. Takes a bit, and there is a brief moment where I thought he got me, but resting at the Lord Vessel gets you 20 Estus Flask, which is way more than you could ever need, so I just power on through. Before long, the final whip cracks down, breaking Gwyn, allowing us to cartwheel for joy, link the flame, finish the game, and proving yes, you can indeed beat Dark Souls with only the whip. So this very quickly went from a slog in the opening hours to a god killer by the halfway point, didn't it? Goes to show, everything truly is viable. Guess that means next time I revisit Dark Souls 1, it's gonna end up being with the hilt you start with, isn't it? Regardless, that's going to be the end of the challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like. If you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe. I'm trying to run these videos out fairly frequently. My name's Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.